What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of I'll Call You Right Back podcast with me, your host. I have a bunch of shit to talk about in this week's intro. It's not going to be too long, but just listen up. So, first and foremost, I watched probably the wildest documentary I've ever seen in my entire life this weekend. It is called Free Solo. Free Solo is a documentary about a dude named Alex Honnold. He is probably... I've never met someone in my... Well, I didn't meet him, obviously, but I've never seen someone in my life that has, a bigger set of testicles on him, to say it lightly, than this guy. Free soloing is climbing mountains without a rope, and this dude climbs El Cap in Yosemite, which is like 3,000 feet without a fucking rope. I don't get it. It is... the whole entire time I knew this dude did not die. Sorry, spoiler alert. It's not really a spoiler alert. The guy's active on social media and shit like that. But he climbs these rocks. He climbs these mountains with no rope. It's just insane. The dude is wearing a pair of pants, pair of shoes, a t-shirt, and a chalk bag. And he got his foot on a rock the size of a grain of salt, just climbing up the side of a mountain like a damn goat. I ain't kidding. Like, if you look at parts of El Capitan Mountain in Yosemite, it's literally almost vertical. Some of the parts are vertical, but this dude climbed this mountain in, I think, 4 hours, but it was the most insane thing I've ever seen in my life. I like a lot of good shit. I'm telling you right now, watch the movie Free Solo. It's available on Hulu. My next point, Yoga Ralph was my guest on last week's podcast. Yoga Ralph used to be a big fat person who changed his life with yoga and fitness. And, I've been campaigning for Yoga Ralph's first fitness drop-in class, or first yoga drop-in class, for like the past couple months. It's my boy. He's been working towards an awesome goal, and he finally got up to this goal. So this past Friday at Yoga Flow in Murraysville, I took my first hot yoga class with Yoga Ralph. This was his first time instructing a real class, and it was insane. It was, I think there was 34 people in this little ass room. It smelled incredible. It was probably 120 degrees in there. I was super, super nervous about this whole entire thing. I was just like, it's 120 degrees in there. I'm super overweight and out of shape, and I was just worried that I wasn't going to be able to do it. I did this yoga lesson with Ralph at my house, a month or two ago, but that was regular heat, and I was sweating to death. So I get into this room, and I'm sitting there, and immediately I'm sweating to death. There's signs everywhere that says no cell phones, no talking. I didn't see this no talking sign in the beginning. So me and my buddy Brian are in there talking, waiting, and this lady comes in and starts chirping. She's like, "Don't be talking." And I was like, geez. So, we stopped talking, and we took this yoga lesson, and I've never sweat more in my life. My fucking shins were sweating. But the next Yoga Ralph $5 drop-in class is going to, I don't know exactly where it's at yet. I want to say Shady Side, but I'll let you know for sure. Yoga Ralph's next drop-in class is going to be on Mother's Day. Mother's Day, $5 cash money. Get in there, get your sweat on. I'm going to try to make it for sure. Another thing I wanted to talk about. Obviously, this podcast is proudly sponsored by Streets on Carson. Streets on Carson is a restaurant in the south side of Pittsburgh, on the 11th block. Sometimes I say the 12th block, but it's on the 11th block. Streets on Carson, street foods around the world, proud sponsor. I rep that place with everything inside of me. I appreciate them looking out as always. Take a trip down the Streets on Carson. Tell them the podcast sent you. I have a website that's out, www.illcallyouRightback.com. If you look at that website, I got a lot of dope-ass merchandise on there. Shirts, hoodies, pins, stickers. Go on there, grab some stuff, and check it out. Let me know what you like about it. Now, for the reason that everyone is here, I have an incredible podcast this week. I talked to a girl named Alyssa Fine. So Alyssa Fine is the owner of Pittsburgh Honey. Pittsburgh Honey is a brick-and-mortar store on Murray Ave, in Squirrel Hill. So Pittsburgh Honey is basically just a store that supplies pure local honey, handcrafted beeswax cosmetics, specialty honeys, and honey candies, handed beeswax candles, and so much more. It's at 2327 Murray Avenue. But I came across, I wanted to talk to someone about bees. I don't know too much about bees, but I know that bees are very vital to our existence, and I've always had a fascination about them. I'm super allergic to bees. I'm terrified of sharks too, but I'm fascinated with them. So I wanted to talk to someone about bees. I Googled Pittsburgh Honey, and sure enough, there's a store called Pittsburgh Honey, and I go on their Instagram and I look it up, and this girl is 100% the right person to talk to. She has pictures of her with thousands of bees on her face. She got pictures of her next to hives, making things, honey, everything. And I hit her up and I was like, hey, I do this podcast. I'm looking for someone that lives and breathes bees, and I want them to come on and talk to me about it, explain to me the life of a beekeeper. And that's exactly what we did. I went to Pittsburgh Honey. Again, Pittsburgh Honey is located at 2327 Murray Avenue. I went there and I interviewed Alyssa, and it was incredible. We talked about every single thing there is to know about bees. At least I tried to. I obviously don't know shit about it, but I asked her a bunch of good questions, that's for sure. Super in-depth about it. We talked about everything from the process of starting your own hive, caring for your bees, harvesting honey, pests, possibilities of the things you can make using beeswax and honey, and, so much more shit. And it was super interesting. Alyssa is doing a highway cleanup right at the bottom of Murray Avenue, April 7th at 2 o'clock. They adopted a highway. So if anyone wants to volunteer for that, hit me up or click the link below in the description and message Pittsburgh Honey on Instagram, or you could text any of the numbers you get whenever you Google them. But yeah, so I am very excited to release this episode. This is an episode that is going to, it's just filled with knowledge. This is like a Rogan level podcast as far as depth of a subject, and I'm proud of it. So without further ado, episode 40, oh, Jesus, 40. I'm not an idiot. Episode 64. 40. Come on now. Give myself more credit. Episode 64 of I'll Call You Right Back podcast with Alyssa Fine of Pittsburgh Honey.
Telephone.
Hello?
Telephone.
I'll call you right back. Call you right back.
Telephone.
I'll Call You Right Back podcast. And this was the first location that you guys had?
Definitely.
Yeah. And now I was looking, I don't know where I seen it, but it might have been Instagram or something like that. But it said that you guys have been doing this since the 80s.
Yeah. So I wasn't around at
Yeah,
the beginning of it. But my father started at a young age. And so really the whole experience began when he was probably about 10 years old. And there was a swarm that happened to land on a tree in his backyard. And it's the home that he still lives in, where I grew up. And a relative, a cousin, a friend, somebody had found out about the swarm and came by and put it into a box, put it into a hive, and then just left it on the property for a while.
Yeah.
Who knows if he forgot about it or what. But so being a curious kid, my dad was very interested in the hive and would kind of peek under the lid and check them out. So that was where his fascination began. And then in the 80s, when he was right out of college or during college, he started out by actually purchasing his first hive from Montgomery Ward catalog. So
Montgomery Ward.
yeah, which is definitely not around anymore. So that gives you an idea.
I don't even know what that is.
It was like a mail order catalog that had been along for I don't know how many years, but
Really? You can order bees out of there?
you can still order bees through the mail. But that was the catalog that he had first purchased his equipment from back in the day. And so he had bees kind of off and on throughout those years. I definitely grew up with some in the backyard. We might have 2 or 3 at a time. Maybe we had 15 or 20.
Yeah.
And eventually
Hives, separate hives.
Yeah, definitely.
Jeez. So this happened from him as a young kid. Like he
Right.
started from being young.
Yeah.
And like how did was it just him that was into it?
I think so. I don't think that his parents were really that involved with it. They probably were supportive of the hobby, but it was pretty much just him for many years until I was in probably about my sophomore year in high school is when he decided to kind of take it up another level from just having a few hives on the side as a hobbyist to making it more of a full-time occupation, something that he could be supporting the family versus the other jobs that he had had prior. So.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So as a hobbyist beekeeper, what are your goals in that? Like you're just like you're cultivating honey just for personal use? Just I don't know. That was like what his goals?
I think hobbyists are usually defined as about 25 hives or fewer. So that might seem like a lot of bees to some people, but it's mainly just because you're interested in bees, you want some honey for yourself, gifts for family and friends. Maybe you want just a more abundance in your garden or your fruit crops, trees.
How many
like that.
bees are in a hive?
Oh man! So on average, probably about 50 or 60,000.
60,000. Yeah. Jeez. So you said you ordered you can order a hive through the mail.
Yes.
What does a hive of bees cost?
That's a good question. As far as the numbers on that, I'm always a little bit unsure. I want to say it's about $150 though for a package.
$150 for bees.
Probably about there. That might be a bit more than some areas. It would vary, but
And they have different types of bees that you could buy?
absolutely.
And the differences of bees, where does that come into play? Like, does that come into play as far as like, can you have any type of bees in any part of the world, or you know what I mean?
So just like you have different types of cats and dogs, different breeds, there are definitely different breeds of honeybees. Honeybees are not native to North America. They're not even from this continent. They're generally from Europe. There are different types of honeybees throughout different continents, but we rely mainly on the European honeybees. There are different breeds. There are Russians, there's Carniolans, they call them Caucasian ones, there's Italian bees, there's British
bees.
black bees. Yeah, there's so many different kinds. But over here, what we generally rely on is whatever mix overwinters well. So some beekeepers might exclusively buy Italian packages in the spring, but maybe later on in the year they would requeen those bees with a local queen that they raised just because it might have a better chance of surviving the winter. Things like that happen for sure.
So, okay, I have a few questions for sure that I now, for anyone that listens to this, I've talked to someone before, episode 10, his name is Jay Swanwick. He had a brief stint with bees that we had a very vague conversation, but I talked to him about like different things that he would want to know about, and he came up with all kinds of questions that kind of like enlightened me on things that I wanted to I was more curious about. And one of the things is overwinter, like how do bees stay over winter and not freeze to death, or like I don't get that.
So in a hive, you might have 50 or 60,000 bees.
Yeah.
Right? The majority of those are workers, so they're female. There might be a couple hundred drones sometime earlier in the season in the spring, the males, and then there's one queen. The whole goal of that hive is to make sure that over winter, the queen survives and she's able to begin producing eggs again in the spring so the population can continue to exist. So a regular worker bee, which is what the hive is made of, might live about 4 to 6 weeks in the summertime, and that's it. She might live a bit longer over the winter because she's not working. So, in the summertime and in the fall, you'll see the bees flying around all over the place, going to the flowers, bringing back pollen and nectar, and generally just working like crazy. But in the winter, they're not leaving the hive so often, and they are really just relying on the honey stores that they produce throughout the summer and the fall to continually have a source of food. They're just slowly eating through their food stores, and they are moving around slowly in that hive in a big cluster, in a big ball, with the queen in the center and just trying to stay warm.
And keep her alive.
Right. So even though it might be below zero outside, it's usually about 80 degrees or more inside the center of that cluster of bees.
Yeah, I guess there would be.
Right.
They'd be generating heat and everything.
Exactly. They can even disengage their wing muscles and kind of shiver.
Really?
And that's how they stay warm.
Jeez.
So, it's like they're doing calisthenics in there to keep the heat up.
Now, I think I saw something on Facebook the other day that just brought it up. I think was it called like fanning or something like that? It was like, it looked like a hive of bees were like, it was like they were doing the wave almost, it looked like. Is that something that you're familiar with?
Honeybees can regulate the temperature in the hive.
Yeah.
And they can do that by shivering and generating heat, or they can fan their wings to try to control the airflow and cool it down too. And that's important for a couple of reasons. Number one, because they want to keep the hive a consistent temperature, especially whenever it starts to get cold. But you also don't want it to overheat. I mean, at the end of the day, the hive is made of wax. It doesn't melt.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right. It doesn't melt until about 150, 160 degrees.
Yeah.
You definitely don't want it to get that warm. But inside the hive, airflow is really important for honey production too, because nectar, which is the sugar water that flowers produce, the main ingredient in honey, is about 80% moisture. Honeybees will bring it back to the hive, add enzymes to it, and start to break down the sugars into simple sugars, which are the components of honey. And they'll also fan their wings over the tops of those cells to try to evaporate the extra moisture out. So it goes from about 80% moisture as nectar to about 16 to 18%. And that's when it's true honey. And that's when they'll cap the cell over with a little bit of protective wax.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yeah, so they need to have the airflow constantly moving over the tops of those cells too, to draw out the moisture.
So the cap you're talking about is like whenever you pull off a box and you cut off that top like layer and honey starts pouring out. That's what you're talking about,
right.
The protective layer,
right? Capping's wax, exactly.
Oh, geez. Okay, we have to rewind this a little bit. So whenever you're like as far as you can remember back, you've been exposed to bees.
Oh yeah.
Now, was your dad, like, was he protective as far as, like, did he let you get in there whenever you were younger and, like, learn about it more, or was he, like, kind of hesitant about it?
I have two younger sisters, too, and, yeah, we all had opportunities to get into the hives and work, depending on, our comfort level. I think most of the time we were just fascinated even just talking about it.
Yeah.
Probably any school presentation I had to do, elementary school
bet.
and up, was, if I could incorporate it into bees, that's what we did. Because not just for us, but the other kids in school were always really fascinated by it.
Yeah, I don't know why. I've always liked them.
I always thought it was normal, you have cats and dogs, but,
Yeah.
you get to school and you find out that...
Did you have other pets?
Hey, nobody else does this. Yeah, we always had a couple cats and dogs around.
Yeah, so you weren't just like just bee people. So like for you to be like did you gravitated towards that at a young age? Like it stuck with you?
Well, I think, especially when you're a young child, you're definitely picking up your parents' interests too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I definitely was more interested in it because that's what my dad did.
Yeah, he was probably obsessed with it.
Yeah, and it was really cool too because it is just interesting on any level. I think most people are fascinated by bees, so it was kind of twofold that I wanted to follow along in his footsteps and be interested in something that he did, but I also had my own fascination.
Oh, absolutely. So for him to just like find a hive of bees and you can just buy a box and just toss them in there. Now, what's like the like the acclimation point for them to like is there a point for like you adding a hive to like what is that called? Like a box? Is it just called a box?
Yeah, we can just call them boxes for sure, or hive bodies.
Hive bodies.
Yeah, there's a couple different components to it. It might just look like a stack of boxes.
Yeah.
We have some in the store here. You can see that. I don't know if you can see the toolbox here. It's actually on an old stack of hives.
Yeah.
The ones at the bottom of that stack are deeper than the ones at the top. So it still looks like the same boxes, but the ones on the bottom we call brood chambers. They're heavier because they're deeper. They're also just called deeps. That's primarily where the queen would remain in the hive. So the bottom half of the hive is usually mostly eggs and pollen. So it's like the nursery for new bees. The top of the hive, those boxes are usually a little bit shallower. And there's mediums, there's shallows, there's a couple different variations in it. And that's typically where the honey is stored. And there's a couple of reasons. Number one, that's what the bees would do on their own because heat rises. So especially in the winter, whenever they're trying to keep the food liquid so they can still eat it, the honey is typically in the top of the hive. We usually will use those shorter boxes towards the top. They're called supers. For honey production, just because they're not quite so heavy.
Yeah.
One of those filled up is going to weigh 60, 65 pounds.
Really?
A brood chamber is substantially more. So you want to use something a little bit shorter, a little bit of a smaller box to the top for the honey production.
So they don't always have to be on the bottom, the brood chambers, but like
sometimes they'll mix it up.
Yeah, they'll mix it up.
But that's preferred.
Wow. And on the top of the boxes, those are you always see someone like pulling out like what are those called? Like
frames.
Right. Yeah, frames.
Right.
Now, whenever you put those in a box, like is there anything in the frames at all, or is it just like do the bees? I've never seen a brand new one. I only see the ones that you see online that you can just like pull out. But are those just like?
So I have one in the window up here too. So our frames we use are wooden frames. They also make plastic ones, different materials. It looks like just a big rectangle. It's like a wooden picture frame, right? And it's going to hold a slice of honeycomb or at least the cells that might have eggs in them too. So it's going to hold a slice of comb, right? We usually will give the bees what's called foundation, just to give them a starting point. So if you've ever played with Legos, it's like the Lego mat, then you can build on top of it, right?
Yeah.
So when bees produce the honeycomb, it's actually made from wax from their own bodies. So when a worker bee is eating large amounts of honey at a certain point in her life, a certain age, the wax glands are active and she's able to secrete little tiny flakes of wax at a time.
Really?
And then the bees have really strong mandibles and they're able to chew that wax and manipulate it and build that perfect six-sided comb.
Oh.
They do that entirely on their own. We do not have to teach them how to do that. They don't need foundation to start with. But if you just let them go wild in the hive, they build it in all kind of,
and
it looks like a maze.
You kind of may give them a little bit more of a...
We give them that structure to start with.
Yeah, the structure.
And that helps us because then we're able to remove the frames and inspect them and see how much honey they're producing. We can see how many eggs that queen is laying. We can see if there's any problems in the hive too, because if there are any diseases, usually it's present in the eggs or in the developing bees. So, and
you could tell that there's diseases in there sometimes.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
but then when you're done looking at the frame, you put it right back in and they go to work. Or if the frame would be filled with honey, like you said, you would take the top layer of cappings wax off with a hot knife and put it into an extractor and remove the honey. And then you can put that empty frame still with the honeycomb intact, just empty, back in the hive. And then they don't have to go through the whole process of secreting wax to build it again. They can reuse it.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild. Now, what is the base that you guys put in there for them?
We mainly use a plastic foundation just because it's a little bit stronger, more substantial.
Yeah.
And that can be used over and over again. It certainly has eventually it's going to wear out, but you get more use out of it compared to, there are wax coated plastic ones.
Yeah.
And then there's also entirely wax foundation too, which you would use for cut comb. Like if you were going to actually remove the honeycomb and sell it in a box, which we do on occasion.
I've seen that in like grocery stores.
Right. So you'd want to use the full wax foundation because you don't want to bite into that and find a piece of plastic foundation in the middle. That would be uncomfortable.
That comb that you see in them plastic containers, you're just supposed to eat that whole thing?
You definitely can.
Yeah.
Wax does not hurt you. It's actually in a lot of candies. So we have jelly beans here with beeswax in them.
I guess I never thought about that.
Gummy bears sometimes have beeswax in it.
I was always curious if that was like you cut a piece and you like squeeze it over or I never used to like honey at all. Like whenever I was younger, I never ate it. I never enjoyed it on anything. And then I started liking it. Like I put it on toast and now I bought like a bunch of different kinds. Like now they start getting into like different flavors. And now I was curious about that. So I went to somewhere and they had different varieties of honey. How is that achieved? Like, is that in regards to the vegetation that's around the bees and stuff like that?
Well, definitely there are. I mean, it depends on the flavor.
Yeah.
So, if you go into the store and you have, bubble gum.
Oh, no. Yeah, I get that.
Sometimes there are flavors added to the honey to give it that taste.
Yeah.
And it should have on the label whatever the flavoring is added. So, that does happen. Certain things like honey sticks, they're usually flavored, not natural flavors, but it's not
Yeah.
a naturally occurring flavor in the honey. But most honeys are getting their flavor and their taste from, the floral sources, the nectar. So every flower, every nectar is going to have a slightly different taste to it. And it can depend on the weather patterns. If it's an extremely dry year, the honey might have a different flavor compared to a wetter year. It's just a product of the different flowers that the bees are visiting at the time that the honey is being produced. And it can range in color from completely water white, almost see-through,
Really?
down to honey that looks like old motor oil.
Jeez.
Really deep and dark, and you can't see through it at all.
Now, the guy that I talked to before that did the bees, he said that was a question that he came up with. He said that if you do want to achieve like a desired, he used sunflower honey as an example. He was he's trying to figure out like as far as like to achieve that desired, variant of the honey. I don't know. First of all, I am the worst with all the terminology. This is a very dumbed down conversation. Obviously, I just try to keep up with my guests as well as I can, as far as like using all the big words and everything. But he was saying like as far as like how many acreage of like sunflowers would you need to like turn the honey that you're cultivating into that.
Right.
Man, that was such a long way to say that.
I don't have the math on the acreage in my, the top of my brain either, but I do know that one hive of bees can travel about 2 or 3 miles in any direction.
Oh, really? It's that far.
It's a lot of acreage that they can cover. And it takes a lot of flowers to make honey. So, 1 pound of honey, your standard jar, is the nectar from about 2 million flowers.
Jeez.
And in her entire lifetime, one honeybee only makes 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey. So there's a lot of bees, a lot of flowers, a lot of miles being flown in order to just produce 1 jar of honey. So it would take quite a lot of acreage, I think, to planting something to try to change the flavor of it. But it definitely, if you only put 1 or 2 hives in the center of a big field of sunflowers, you're probably going to taste some difference there.
Jeez. That's pretty crazy. What was the fraction you used that creates?
1/12 of a teaspoon.
1/12 of a teaspoon per bee.
Right.
Jeez. Now, what is a hive? What's the yield of honey that you get?
So in Pennsylvania, I think the average is about 30 to 40 pounds of honey per hive. And that's what we would extract every year. Some hives definitely achieve way more than that.
Yeah.
Others, maybe not so much. That's the average. But that's the honey that we actually remove from the colony when we extract. Otherwise, they're still making honey from maintenance. That's their food source in the hive.
Oh, yeah. So
they're making more than that just to live off of. And sometimes, we don't get to extract the honey that they need to use because they've already consumed it before we can get to the hive.
Jeez.
So they definitely make more than that.
and we're going to be all over with this thing because I have questions jumping in and out of my head the whole time. So whenever you were younger, how many hives did you have?
I think we probably had maybe 5 or 6 at a time.
Yeah.
Is what sounds about normal. We didn't really have a whole lot of hives. And there definitely was a time eventually whenever we didn't have any for a few years.
Yeah.
Because we had challenges with the health of the bees. And since it wasn't really a full-time business at that time, it was more of a hobby. They are expensive to replace. So if we lost a couple and they were gone, it was just, okay, maybe we'll have a year without them until we decide to start up again.
Now, what type of things cause, the bees to die or leave?
Well, I think in our area, one of the most precarious times of years right now. So you have bees that went into the winter with whatever food they had left and however many bees were left. The queen stopped laying eggs, and then over the next couple of weeks or months, the population just started to dwindle because the bees only live for about 4 to 6 weeks in the summer. They might live 3 months or so in the winter because they're not working quite so hard. But you definitely don't have as many bees coming out of the winter as when you started, right?
Yeah.
So this time of year, when the queen is finally able to, they call it breaking cluster, whenever they stop just hanging out in a big ball in the hive and they start to spread out because the queen's going to start laying eggs in the hive and they have to cover the brood and keep it warm overnight. let's say that, so the bees have started to spread out, they've broken that cluster, and then we get a cold snap, which
that's a
is
good
really
point.
common.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
If they just don't have the population to create that warmth, to generate the warmth, then they go down really quick. So I think,
I didn't even think about that.
yeah, so I think in this area, weather is really, one of the biggest factors in whether or not we have our bees overwintering or not. But also, if they're already weakened going into the winter for various factors, let's say it has to do with pests in the hive. So we have problems with varroa mites, which is the biggest deal right now.
That's what he told me. He said, how do you take in consideration the varroa mite? What is that?
So a varroa mite is basically just a little parasitic bug on a bug. So it would be like if we had, for example, I've heard a researcher once say like rats hanging off of our bodies, which would be really disgusting, but that's about the size that they are compared to the bees. You can actually see them on the honeybees. They look like little reddish brown dots that kind of attach to them when they're in the larval stage. So a mite would be under the cappings when a bee is developing from an egg into a larva, pupa, adult. So they actually reproduce under the cell with the bee as it's developing, and they stick to the bee and continue to just sap energy off of them for the duration of their lives. So if you have a bee that's already kind of weakened because it's got a couple mites attached to it, and then it goes into the winter, it isn't able to.
Probably not the best.
It's not at full capacity, right?
Now, does that spread? Like if one bee has a mite, is it easy for that to spread throughout?
Oh, definitely. Right. Absolutely. Okay. They're able to reproduce very, very quickly in the larval cells. So, if you
once you have a contamination, it's probably like adding a drop of ink into like a cup of water.
Right. You see one mite, there's probably a couple hundred somewhere else.
Now, if you're in the beginning stages of that process from the beginning, like, and you go and inspect the hive and you see mites in there, like, what are your thoughts? Do you just you kind of write that hive off, or
no? There's always hope for them.
Okay,
there's always hope. So when we were talking about different breeds of bees, there are different types that are being produced that are a couple of kinds. They have hygienic bees, which are ones that are they are more likely to remove a cell that has a mite in it, maybe.
Really?
So if there's a bee developing under that cell and they know that there's an abundance of mites there, or definitely if the larva has died for some reason, they are more quickly to identify that and remove it, so you can kind of stop that process.
Jeez.
There are also ones that are called, they're called varroa-sensitive hygienics. So they also have what are called mite maulers. So they're developing bees that have more of a biting tendency. So they will actually identify the mites in the hive and gnaw their little legs off so that they drop out of the hive. And then if they're not mobile, then they're not able to get back up to the larval cells and reproduce again. So that's a possibility.
Jeez, there's different breeds of bees to do different services.
Definitely.
That is insane.
But you can also medicate for them too. There's there are certain things, whether it's doing powdered sugar rolls. That's more of looking for a mite count. But if the bees are grooming, if there's a reason for them to groom themselves more in depth, they might be able to identify the mites and remove them versus just going along their way with the mites on their bodies. And so sometimes not only would you introduce a lot of powdered sugar to the hive, that way you can also mix a powdered chemical to it, or a medicine basically that would maybe be toxic to the mites but not to the bees too.
Yeah.
But it is definitely a sensitive balance because you want to target the bug that's on the bug and not hurt the bee.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, whenever you say introduce powdered sugar to it, what do you mean by that?
I want to say that the powdered sugar is mainly for doing a mite load count. So you might, it's very scientific. You would go to a hive and you would scoop up a cup of bees. So you would actually
just scoop them up.
You would take a cup of bees and you would put it into a mason jar with some powdered sugar and you would give them a good shake. And the bees would be coated with the powdered sugar.
Okay.
But you wouldn't go through the whole hive that way. But you might do that just to then you would shake those bees then over top of a sticky board or a screen, and you would count how many mites fall off to determine if you needed to treat the hive for mites at all. You want to see if there are.
So what
if
about
there is a problem there.
What about the powdered sugar makes the mites fall off?
I know that the bees themselves will start to groom the sugar off.
Okay.
So once you get them coated, you let them sit for a little bit, then you shake the mites out.
now.
Right.
because they have something on them. They're gonna groom
They want to
themselves
eat
naturally.
it.
Yeah,
They want to eat it, so they're going to
Okay.
check each other out and get the mites off, right?
That's pretty wild. Now, whenever you were learning all this stuff as a younger kid, like, did you know that this was something that you wanted to do, or did you have other dreams and other things?
I don't know that I really saw it get into this point. I
Yeah.
mean, we
You have a bee store now.
yeah, it's kind of wild how things happen.
Yeah, it is. I mean, like everything in here is there's different products made from beeswax.
Mm-hmm.
There's 90 different honeys, and not 90, but there's a lot. I'm looking at the menu right now, and I see mini bear, different size of jars of honey, body butter, lip balm, exfoliating sugar scrub, foaming honey cleanser. So you could pretty much, I mean, like you could use a lot of what you're getting to make different products.
Well, I think my interest in all of this really started with, with all the other products of the hive, not just the honey and the bees, but at some point in high school, I remember coming across some kind of do-it-yourself lip balm recipe in a magazine. And I thought, okay, well, I don't have all the exact ingredients here, but I do have like a mountain of beeswax outside. So I think I can make this happen. And the first batch was absolutely terrible. But I kept at it. I was really interested in kind of the crafting or the do-it-yourself aspect using the other products of the hive. So I started making lotions and lip balms definitely in high school and in college.
Really? Using the honey that you have?
Right.
Or using the resources that you had?
All the products that we had, all the resources we had available, the honey and the beeswax.
Wow.
So all the stuff that you see here, all the lotions and lip balms, the foaming cleanser, the sugar scrubs, all that stuff is something that I wanted. So I started to make it, but produced with our honey or wax or both.
Wow. So you made a lot of the stuff in here?
Everything.
You made everything in here is
pretty
made
much
by
everything.
you guys.
Yeah,
Jeez.
with the exception of the honey energy drinks, the jewelry, and I definitely do not yet whittle the honey dippers.
The honey dippers. Yeah, I never knew what those things were. I just remember seeing them on cereal boxes and like never understanding them. But yeah, like they're all different types of things that you can make with the waxes and everything like that. It's pretty crazy. So whenever you're advancing, or not advancing, but like leveling up as many hives as you have, like for you to get a queen, I know every hive has to have a queen, and that's like that's the main part of it, right?
Right.
Now, where do you get a queen? Do you breed your own queens, or can you make queens, or do you have to buy them separately? How is a queen a queen?
All right, so let's talk about how she's made first.
Yeah.
Right. So in a normal functioning hive, there's a queen bee who's laying eggs every day.
Okay.
And she might lay, 1,000 or 2,000 eggs every single day.
A day?
Oh, yeah. Right. I mean, they live 3 to 6 weeks, so you have to be constantly producing more bees. So she's producing eggs all day long and just filling the cells with eggs that are going to then develop into the worker bees or the drones. So when a queen lays an egg, she has a choice if she's going to lay a fertilized egg or an unfertilized egg. So a fertilized egg is always going to develop into a female bee, which would be a worker. It also has the choice to become a queen, but that's up to the workers. So if she lays an unfertilized egg, it still develops into a drone, into the males. So that's where they come in out, that's where they arrive in the hive. But any fertilized egg that would become a worker bee could also become a queen if she's given a larger cell to grow in and a slightly different diet as she's developing. So everyone thinks about royal jelly is what makes a queen. And to an extent it is. I think there's been a little bit more research on the topic that shows that queens really develop because they are not fed bee bread, so they don't get as much pollen. They're actually being fed more of that royal jelly.
What is royal jelly? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so it's a substance that the worker bees will secrete from glands in their mouths. And it's definitely a more nutritious food in the hive compared to some of the other stuff that the other larvae would get.
Yeah.
So everyone gets a little bit of royal jelly, but the queen larva is basically fed that exclusively. And since she has a larger cell to grow in and she's fed better food, she grows very rapidly. So a regular worker bee might take about 21 days to fully develop and hatch out of her cell. So 3
21
weeks.
days, 3 weeks from being laid to coming out.
To coming out as an adult worker bee and just going to work.
Jeez.
Absolutely. The queen would develop in only 14 days. Even though she's a bigger bee.
Yeah, what is the size difference? Is she like exponentially bigger?
No, she has to fit in the same world as the others.
Okay.
So she really is just longer than the other bees. She has a much longer abdomen. And the entire abdomen is pretty much just eggs. So
I guess that makes sense.
you need more room to have that going on all the time.
Yeah.
So a queen can come from any egg that is given a better diet and more room to grow. And then after that, she would go out on a mating flight, and then she'd come back to the hive and be able to lay eggs for 2 or 3 years is the average lifespan.
2 or
for a
3
queen.
years and all the rest of the bees are living for
A couple weeks.
Jeez. And
So-
it basically comes down to like their it all comes down to the way that they were, I don't know, like created with the royal jelly and
Right.
everything like
They
that.
come from the exact same eggs.
Yeah.
So,
Jeez.
so then if you don't have a queen in your hive, let's say, you're visiting your hive, and you're looking for your queen and you just can't find her, and there aren't any fresh eggs in the hive, something went wrong.
How do you
Who
even
knows what
find a
happened?
queen with 60,000 bees?
Well, usually we'll put a dot on the back of the queen.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
You basically just use a paint marker. She moves kind of slowly, so when you see her in the hive, you would keep a paint marker in your pocket with the correct color on it, and you would put a little dot on her back.
It's pretty visible though. Which one is a queen though?
It can be hard to find her first,
Yeah.
but once you know what you're looking for and
I
you
guess
do
that
random
makes sense.
hive inspections pretty regularly, it can be pretty easy to spot her.
How regular is a hive inspection?
You don't want to mess with them probably more than once a week, every other week, probably.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so, geez, that's crazy. Put a dot on there.
Well, then you know where she is.
Yeah, that
And
makes
then-
sense.
Right,
I
and
never
then
thought
if you're
about it.
right, so then if you go back to the hive and you're looking for your queen and you just can't find that dot anywhere, and there's no eggs in the hive, no fresh eggs, you know that something went wrong. That queen, something happened to her, and who knows? I mean, they do live for about 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
But accidents happen too. Maybe she just stopped producing eggs, and the workers decided to create a new queen, and they got rid of her. That happens.
Did they just kill her off?
She's really dependent on the workers to feed her and take care of her. So if she's not performing up to standards, then
Yeah.
they will definitely they can stop feeding her. They can kill her. Other times they will just start to produce queens somewhere else in the hive and keep her away from those developing queens. And so once the first new one hatches, any other queens, you can only have one per hive.
Yeah.
So they'll fight.
Oh,
Whichever one
really?
survives would be the new queen.
Jesus, that's crazy.
So you can do that. You can create a hive intentionally queenless, and the bees will make maybe 5 or 6 queen cells at a time
so bees could function without a queen.
for a short amount of time.
Yeah,
I mean,
for a short amount of
they
time,
can still
then.
do all the work that they
I
need
guess,
to do, but
yeah.
that hive population will eventually just dwindle because there's no new bees being added to it. But there,
You could reincorporate a different queen though, from like you could switch them in and out and everything.
so let's say, your hive goes queenless and your bees are not making any new queens
Yeah.
and you don't know what to do. You can order a queen. You can get just a little queen in a tiny little cage shipped to your door.
How do they survive in the mail?
I guess they have air holes in the boxes.
That's
and
crazy.
We've definitely gotten queens shipped in before. We have that on the agenda sometime this spring too. And you might buy a certain variety or a certain strain of bees that might have certain tendencies. Maybe this kind of bee is a little bit more aggressive, but they also have really great honey producing capabilities. So
Yeah.
you want to go for that one. Maybe this one's more mild mannered and is definitely great for overwintering. So you might pick and choose different genetics or different types of breeds of bees. So you would buy a couple queens or one queen and have it shipped to you, and she's in this tiny little cage with
What's
a
a
couple
queen run?
workers. How much?
Yeah, what's a queen run?
I mean, you can probably get them depending on if you're just getting them from a friend. maybe a couple bucks, $5 or $10.
Oh, okay.
But I mean,
what's like the max? Like what's like the Lamborghini of queens?
I don't know what breed that might be, but if you're buying breeder queens,
Yeah.
you can spend a couple $100s on.
Oh,
a bee.
really?
Certainly, yeah.
Jeez.
I mean, there are people that specialize. So, in beekeeping, there are so many different occupations. There's people that are in it, for just honey.
Yeah.
There are people that are in it just for fun, right? There's people that will take their bees, migratory beekeepers. They put them on semi-trucks and they take them all around the country for pollination accounts. So they might specialize in just pollinating food crops for us.
I didn't think about that.
And then there are people who just produce queens. They just specialize in making queens for other beekeepers to supplement their own operations. And some people that just sell full-size hives or packages. So it would be basically like a little starter hive. You have a queen in a cage and then 3 pounds of bees, which is about 10,000 bees around her. And you would ship that out.
3 pounds of bees.
We just weigh them all the time.
Yeah.
You want a cup of bees or you want...
That's crazy. Now, whenever you were younger, doing all this, were you getting stung? Like back then, like were you guys always in like full gear, like a full suit?
I honestly do not remember getting stung as a kid. Definitely not a honeybee sting anyway. I think I stepped on a wasp or something in the yard once, but now, yeah, I definitely suit up because I used to be kind of sensitive to the stings. And I think it depends on the type of bee that stings you. You know, is it a really young bee or is it a guard bee, you know, somebody that's protecting the hive? Is it a bee that you accidentally squished, or was she angry and buzzing at you and you didn't leave her alone and then she stung you? I think there's some variation in how potent the sting is.
That makes sense.
And it also depends on where you get stung too. I mean, I've gotten stung right in my, you know, under my eye before at an event, and my whole face was swollen. So, you know, I wasn't allergic, thank goodness, but I did have a pretty nice reaction to it. And I've also, you know, been stung multiple times with nothing. So I think it just depends. But I definitely have a preference for, at least at the very minimum, always wearing a veil, because I don't want bees on my nose and stuff.
Yeah.
And I do like to wear gloves too, and long sleeves if possible. So.
Huh. Now, whenever you go to do a checkup or anything like that, are they usually like super active? Like if you pull out, like what is a check? Do you pull out like a frame, or do you just pull off the lid and make sure that like things visually look in order?
So if you're going to go do a hive check, you're looking to make sure that there's a queen in that hive, or if, at the very minimum, if you don't see the queen, you want to see evidence of fresh eggs in that hive.
Okay.
Right. They're really tiny. They're like grains of rice in there, you know, real small, smaller than that, almost kind of translucent. So it's hard to see them unless you have some really good backlighting.
Almost like a maggot. Like
real tiny, very tiny. And that's the goal. You want to make sure that there are eggs in that hive or a queen. And since they usually are in the lower part of the hive, you do have to take a few boxes off to get there. But along the way too, you want to make sure that those bees have, you know, are they bringing in enough nectar? Is there honey in this hive? Are they starting to cap over some honey? You know, wow, did you see some varroa mites in that hive? Do you see hive beetles? Do you see wax moths? Are there any pests in there?
So there's I'm sure there's a big variety. What is a wax beetle?
So there's something called a hive beetle that
hive beetle.
Yeah, hive beetles, they're not as common in our area. They're mainly in more like New Jersey, where you might have like more of sandy soil conditions.
Okay.
But they are found around here too, and they make a mess of the hive. They kind of tear through the wax and gum things up, and they're pretty gross. So you might put a trap in there that they would crawl into, like with oil in the bottom, and not be able to come out.
Really?
So hive beetles are kind of gross. Wax moths are in hives, mainly ones that might not be attended fully. So
yeah, especially
comb that has been maybe disused. So a wax moth just lives off of the wax. It eats through all of it too, and they look like really big worms, little white worms crawling through the hive. They're pretty big compared to the bees.
Yeah.
And eventually they will turn into a moth and disappear, but they're kind of gross. So they are. I think they live more in a symbiotic kind of relationship with the bees, because eventually that comb is used so often that they don't want to reuse it. It gets gross after a couple of seasons. So
just kind of let it go.
Yeah. I mean, we don't really appreciate it so much because we want to reuse the comb as much as we can, but that one isn't, I guess, as bad.
Now, do you ever have any experiences like dealing with other pests, as far as not necessarily pests, but like as far as like raccoons, like, you know, things like that? Is that a problem? Like the raccoons, I would assume that they would go after honey.
Yeah, I think they do. I think skunks are a little bit more of a problem than raccoons.
Skunks?
Believe it or not. Yeah. You wouldn't think that.
Jeez.
But yeah, a lot of these other little animals that might come towards the hive are not really interested in the honey as much as they're interested in eating the bees themselves or the larvae.
Oh, really?
Right. So, and even bears too. I mean, everyone thinks about Winnie the Pooh looking for honey, but and there are problems with bears. Maybe not quite as often in our area, but it definitely happens. And whatever it is, they can definitely unstack a hive and get inside of it and
tear
just
it apart,
do some damage. And the worst part is then if a bear opens up a hive, he's not putting it back together. So then if you have a cold night, then your bees freeze, or they're open to the elements. Then they might just disappear.
Now, will there ever be bees from other hives trying to sneak into the other hive? Like, do bees like go and like kind of trespass into the other hives? Like,
definitely.
Yeah, that's the thing. Now, what's like the process of that? Are they like welcomed, or are they like killed and casted out of the box?
So there is something called just like called hive drift. So if you have 10 or 12 hives in a row, usually the bees will always go back to the same hive that they came out of.
How do they do that?
Whenever they leave the hive, they're able to basically generate a map of the area. They use the sun to orient themselves, and
Really?
yeah, so they can go out. Remember, they'll go 2 or 3 miles for,
I guess,
for
yeah.
flowers for nectar, and
I
then
don't know
they'll
why
come
I
back
think
to the
they're
same
idiots,
hive.
but they make like perfectly combed. I don't know. I got to give them more credit than I do.
Yeah. So, but when they come back, sometimes they do make a mistake. Maybe they get blown off course a little bit. They go to the next hive over or a couple down the row.
Yeah.
It happens. And as long as they're coming back to the hive with pollen and nectar, they're bringing gifts. They're allowed in.
I guess that makes sense.
But let's say you have a hive that's kind of weaker out of that row.
Yeah.
One that's maybe not doing so well, not a big population, something's going on over there. If they can't defend the hive, then you bet the other ones next door are going over and trying to rob out whatever resources they can get.
Yeah, speaking
Definitely.
of that, you said rob. I did some research and I saw a term that's called robbing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just other bees going to steal honey from other hives.
Right.
That's a common thing.
It definitely happens, right?
Now, whenever they do that, is that pretty much is the negative aspect of that is like they'll go to another hive, grab some honey, go back to their house, and be like, "Yo, there's all kinds of honey. Let's go take it." Is it kind of like that?
Yeah, definitely, because bees are smart. They don't want to do extra work if they don't have to, right?
Yeah.
So if let's say they're going out to flowers and they know that, one flower has a really, really high sugar content versus another nectar.
Yeah.
It's going to be easier to make honey out of the one that has a higher sugar content versus one that's less, right?
Yeah.
So they might go to one flower and prefer to go to one variety over one that's right next door just because it's, they're able to make honey out of it. So when it comes to honey that's already made next door and
Yeah.
they just have to rob it out, of course they're going to go for that.
That makes sense.
They'll all come over and take it. We can help out a weak hive by putting what's called an entrance reducer on it. So instead of having, the bottom of the box, it looks like a big front porch.
Yeah.
So those bees can come in and out all across that. That's over a foot wide. But if we know that there's a hive that's maybe struggling, or maybe is a brand new hive and is a little bit weaker,
Yeah.
we could put an entrance reducer on it.
So it's not as open for other people to come in and out.
Exactly. There's a much smaller space for that hive to defend until they are, more well established and can defend the hive better.
Jeez, that's crazy. Now, what do you do to combat the pests that could be in there, like the varroa mite and the what was it called, the comb beetles?
Hive beetles.
Hive beetles, yeah.
Hive beetles, wax moths.
Like, what do you do for preparations on that?
Well, some of them you don't have to worry about as long as the hive is strong, is well fed,
Okay,
is
yeah.
bringing in a lot of pollen and nectar. They can keep those things at bay pretty well on their own. But certainly for us, before and after the honey season, so this time of year, whenever we're just getting back into the bees, and then kind of before you sort of put them to bed later in the fall,
Yeah.
going into the winter, we might do a little bit of medication on those bees mixed in with powdered sugar so that they have,
Okay.
right. I mean, it's along the lines of making sure that your dog's vaccinated, your dog gets shots and stuff.
Just the pre-preparations. But if you let them get out of hand, I'm sure that it gets easier for all that to
Exactly.
to come in.
And there definitely are different schools of thought. Some folks are just, really they don't want to medicate bees. They want to do more of like a, a natural approach to it. And there's that thought too, that maybe, survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
Right. So if the hive can't make it over the winter or can't, you don't want those genetics. You want the ones that survive, the ones that are local survivors. And I get that too. But personally, I do think if you can give them a chance to survive just by giving them a little bit of a medication, at the beginning of the year, or at
Yeah,
the
you
end of
might
the
as
year,
well.
when it's bookending the honey flow and you don't have to worry about anything, it's not like you're sprinkling right on the comb.
Yeah, right.
They don't have any honey in the hive anyway. It's good for them to give them that boost.
Now, what
I think
is
it's
your
responsible?
What's the preparation you do for them to go? Do you call it overwintering?
Right.
Is that what you were saying? Overwintering?
Right.
No, that's just like, what do you do to prepare for that?
For us, what we'll do is some of the latest research, or in the last couple of months, is talking about how to get your hives through the winter. And one of the biggest factors is just population. So the bigger the hive, the better the chances are, because they have more bees in it, that they can
Yeah.
stay warm, that they can get through the winter. So what we'll do is, if we have 150, 200 hives in the summertime, going into the winter, we might get down to half of that easily, because we can take 2 hives that kind of are struggling, maybe that aren't to their fullest potential, and combine them. the hives will naturally, the bees won't compete so much, but the queens will be in competition. Whichever
Yeah.
one survives is obviously the more fit queen. And so you'll have a strong queen going into the winter and a large population around it. And so that gives them a better chance of survival. We also do give our bees some feed in the winter. And this is generally a dry feed. So sugar. Bees want sugar. They
Yeah.
want sugar water. They want honey. So we might give them something called candy blocks or fondant. So it's basically just a brick of sugar, a candy block.
Yeah.
And there might be some essential oils mixed into it, or maybe a dry pollen as well, or a pollen substitute.
That helps benefit it.
Yeah, so then that would be towards the top of the hive, so that once they get to the top, if they run out of room in the hive before winter's over, they have some feed there at the top to keep them going. And it's not going to add any moisture to the hive either, which would probably be a little bit of a detriment to them.
Okay. And now, is there ever any worry about like mold or anything like that in the hives?
That's a good question. I don't think mold so much.
Yeah, I was curious about that because, like, if they're moist, if things are always moist and it's hot out, what if I never knew if that was a thing. I've never heard about it. And I didn't really want to like Google into it and like get too deep into it because it's better whenever it comes to me spontaneously.
I think if you have hives extra, you have an extra soup or an extra hive body with frames in it, just out in the open, maybe not being used in a stack, which does happen if you're not using it. If it's totally open to the elements, you might have some kind of mold or something happening, but there's no bees in there to maintain it at that time. It's just extra equipment. But a lot of the products inside the hive actually have antibacterial qualities to them. So
Really?
honey itself is antibacterial because it has such a low moisture content, only about 18% water. Not a lot of bacteria, not a lot of things can really survive in the honey. So it's actually used for wound care pretty often. There's a
Really?
brand called Meta Honey right now that makes honey infused bandages and wraps and stuff. So
Jeez.
it's antibacterial already, which would help with a mold problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on top of that, bees also coat the inside of the hive with something called propolis. So your brand new hive box might look like brand new untreated wood, but after you come back a few weeks later and check on those bees, it might look like it's poorly stained. Bees will go and collect tree saps and resins, and they will coat the inside of the hive with that.
Jeez.
And so it gives it kind of an antibacterial surface, and it also seals up any small cracks inside the hive so they can control that airflow again, too.
I didn't think about that.
So
That's pretty wild. That's definitely
Definitely.
pretty wild. Now, whenever you're harvesting this honey, I don't know if I asked you or not, but the beginning to the end of like, getting a hive in there to be able to harvesting honey, how long is that time frame?
So if you're starting with a full-size colony, let's say you just buy a hive off of somebody, you
Yeah.
can probably expect some honey later that year. No
Okay.
problem. If you're starting with a nuke or nucleus colony is basically like a half-sized starter hive.
Yeah.
You might so a nuke would only have about 5 frames in it versus a regular hive box would have 10, and then you might have a few of those stacked up together. So you might have 30 or 40 frames in a regular sized hive.
Yeah.
A nuke is only about 5 frames. So if you were to start with that, you definitely have a jump start on buying just the bees because you have some frames with some resources in them already. But if the rest of your equipment that you put the bees into is frames with just foundation, no drawn out comb,
Yeah.
then they're at a disadvantage.
Yeah, it's
because
going to
they've
take
drawn out.
longer, obviously.
Right. So, you can kind of, and then if you think back to a package, which is just a screen box with 3 pounds of bees in it and a queen, if you're putting them on just foundation, they don't have anything to start with then, and they have to really, really build it up. You might not be able to harvest honey for a full year after that because they've got to use all that honey just for maintenance and to build the hive still.
Now, is it important when you harvest, like as far as like spring or fall or things like that?
Yeah, we do about 3 extractions a year easily. We'll do one in this. We call it a spring honey because that's what the bees were eating in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll do an extraction usually about the end of June, early July. There's not really much that happens over the summer months. So the next time we would do an extraction might be mid-September, early part of September.
Okay.
And then we might do another one towards mid-October, late October.
Now, do you get a difference in the honey that depending on like the season that you harvest in?
Definitely. So in our area, they usually start out pretty light. So spring honeys tend to be really, really light, pale yellow colors.
Yeah.
By the time we get to early fall, you might have a deeper color. deeper
okay.
honey.
Yeah.
Goldenrod tends to be pretty light unless you have some other wildflower mixed in at the same time. We also get a really fun honey here in late August, early September called red bamboo. So it's made from Japanese knotweed, which is an invasive plant that's all over the area. A lot of gardeners really hate it because once it takes root, it spreads.
Yeah, you can't do nothing about it.
Yeah, nobody likes it, but you know what? It really does make a beautiful, beautiful, almost like a scarlet red honey, and it's a really, really mild honey too. So we, while most people don't want those plants in their backyards, we do rely on that as a honey crop around here.
Yeah.
Which is great. So there is a positive to all of the bamboo that nobody wants.
Now, wow. That's pretty wild. I never even thought about that. I don't understand why I never thought about like the different flowers and everything incorporating into like the flavor, the color, everything like that. I guess that's just like it should have been assumed. But now, whenever you harvest this honey and you cut these caps off and you extract all that honey out of there, do you clean the frames off completely, or do you leave the comb in there and everything is like a base for them to restart from?
Yeah, we let them restart from it.
Okay.
Every time. Once we extract the honey, there's obviously going to be a little bit of a honey residue in the combs too that we're not able to extract every last drop. They're not totally dry when we're done with them.
Yeah.
But it's close enough. So yeah, we can put that back into another hive.
And it probably saves time.
It saves the bees time and energy. It saves us time because we don't have to wait for them to build new comb again.
Yeah.
So yeah, they reuse it. Absolutely. They can fill it right up again.
It's pretty interesting. Now, he was talking about the best pollinators for like smaller gardens and stuff like that. What's beneficial to have in your garden to, I guess I don't understand what he was asking. Best pollinators for your gardens, as far as like to keep your garden healthy and stuff like that, to get bees and everything to come through there. Like, what are some of their favorites? Is that
I know
a dumb
that,
question.
well, so like if you want your garden to be better pollinated,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, honeybees are definitely going to help. They're not going to hurt because they're pollinators. So I don't think bees really intend to be pollinators so much. They're really interested in the nectar from the plants. So they go from one flower to another and they're digging around in the flower to get the nectar out.
Yeah.
But along the way, bees they're little fur balls. They're covered in hair. They're fuzzy. You might not notice that, but they're furry.
Yeah.
And as they go from one flower to the next, pollen sticks to their bodies and they carry it from one plant to another. Honeybees have a really cool, I guess you want to call it a feature, a characteristic, where they only visit flowers of one type on a trip out of the hive.
Really?
And that's important to us because if you think about, bees going from a dandelion to an apple, that's definitely not going to cross-pollinate. But if they're visiting just apples on one trip from the hive, and then when they come back, maybe they'll go out to dandelions next, then that apple is able to be pollinated because they're going from flowers on one trip. They might visit 100 or 150 flowers on a trip and then come back. So they're spreading pollen from one place to another. They're definitely... So they're pollinating. Maybe it's an accidental thing because they're really looking for the nectar. But that's something that we have come to really rely on.
Yeah.
Of course, honeybees aren't native to this continent. There are other native pollinators out there. So bumblebees are probably the most common bees that you see, other than honeybees, floating around, and they're really, really great pollinators. And bumblebees actually have they're stronger because they're bigger. So when they go to a flower, it's something called buzz pollination. They can actually shake the flower a little bit and allow the pollen to travel into the flower more quickly to be able to pollinate it. So
Jeez.
They're a little bit more effective, but they also cover less of an area, and they're solitary bees. So if you're pollinating, let's say like a greenhouse or something, tomatoes, maybe you'd want a small hive of bumblebees instead.
Yeah.
But if you're just generally pollinating whatever's in your backyard or your garden, yeah, honeybees would be great for that.
That's pretty wild. Now, this might be a dumb question as well, but
there are no dumb questions.
No dumb questions about these bees. I've seen this everywhere. It says "save the bees." What's the thought behind that?
So the way that things are right now, there are probably over 100 different crops that rely on honeybee pollination in this country, and so it comes down to 1 out of every 3 bites of food that we eat is somehow dependent on insect pollination, and honeybees account for over 80% of that. So there are food crops that we have right now that just would not exist without honeybees, or not the way that they do. So one of my favorite examples, if you like almonds at all,
Yeah.
Almonds, almond milk, almond everything, we would not have almonds at all in this country without honeybee pollination, because they're grown in such dense groves in California that literally over half of the managed hives, I mean, we're talking a couple million hives in our country, travel to California every spring. Just a couple weeks ago, they finished up just to pollinate almonds. So beekeepers all across the country will load their bees up on semi-trucks, and they'll take them out to almond groves and drop them down and allow them to do pollination for just a couple weeks while they're blooming, and then they take them on to the next crop. So our system of farming, of agriculture, is very, very dependent on honeybee pollination. It increases the yield. So, instead of just getting a few apples on a tree, you get, and tiny, ugly ones, we get a big, beautiful harvest of nice round apples. And when I do presentations with younger kids, especially around apple season, so, maybe September, if you cut an apple sideways, to see like the little star inside.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember doing that as a kid.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you look and you see 10 seeds in there, then that apple was fully pollinated, and it should be like a nice round apple. If you count and there's not a seed in each one of the little points of the star, then that apple might be like a little bit lumpy too, or misshapen. It wasn't fully pollinated. It wasn't visited by a honeybee enough times. And so you didn't get like the nice apple. It
Wasn't
develop.
fully developed.
Right, exactly.
Jeez.
So you can see it just inside of that.
That's
You
pretty-
try that next time you go to the store. Get a really ugly apple and then get a really nice apple and cut them both in half and see how many seeds are in there.
Jeez, that's pretty wild.
So yeah, we're really dependent on bees.
Now, how do bees, I mean, we're jumping all over with this, and it tends to happen. It tends to be a jumpy conversation whenever, I really don't know shit about what we're talking about, and it just comes from what's popping into my head. But, how do bees keep how does a queen keep the reins on her hive? Is it regarding, pheromones and, how does that happen?
Well,
60,000 bees from one slightly bigger bee? How?
Well, I think the misconception is that the queen's in charge.
Yeah, is it not? That's not true?
I don't think she is at all. Not really. I mean, it does come down to pheromones for sure, as far as the communication between bees. Because when you think about it, inside the hive is totally black. It's dark.
I guess,
So
yeah.
Yeah. So bees have two really big eyes, compound eyes,
Yeah.
lenses so they can see all the way around them. They also have three tiny little eyes in the middle of those that are for low light conditions. So they can kind of see in the hive, but it really is, a lot of it's just dependent on pheromones and scents and stuff. And their antennas, what they use to talk to each other too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the bees, the workers in the hive, will know right away if they have a queen inside that hive or not, because as the queen travels through the hive laying eggs, there are bees around her that kind of they circle around her and they take care of her. So they're touching her and they're making sure that she's well fed and she's groomed and she's taken care of. They'll clean up after her, whatever she has to do, because her job is literally just going from one cell to the next and putting an egg in it. Repeat, repeat, repeat. So she doesn't stop and give directions or anything. She's just blind, just going along and laying eggs, and the
I guess
workers
that's
are
a
the
good
ones that are
point.
caring for her.
That's a good point.
And it's all dependent on those pheromones. If she stops producing as many eggs as she should be producing,
They'll kill her.
the pheromone isn't the right way, right? They can tell that this there's not enough eggs in here. There's not enough pheromones. There's something not quite right. They might start to produce a brand new queen from one of those eggs while they still can. And once those eggs, those workers or those queens develop, they'll find out they'll seek the old queen and kill her, and then repopulate it. It's called a supersedure. So they'll make a new queen to take over the old one. So
That is crazy.
yeah, I mean, a lot of people think that the queen's in charge, but she really is. She's important for the hive for
She's
sure.
just a big tool.
Right. She's definitely not. She's not in charge. She's at the whim of the
Wow.
workers. I mean,
Because
up
they
to-
get to choose who is who, and they kind of allow someone to be the queen and stuff.
right. Right. She doesn't pick a successor and lay an
Yeah.
egg to become the queen. A lot of people think
Damn,
that's the
that's
case.
crazy.
They do it.
I thought that she was just some just bossing, barking out orders at people.
No.
Wow.
She
That's
is-
pretty wild.
Yeah.
Now, did you go to school for this? Did you go to any college or anything to learn about bees?
I went to Penn State for agribusiness management,
Oh, okay.
which I guess I'm using my degree, so I'm really thankful for that.
Yeah, I mean,
because
so
I'm
many
managing an
people are
agricultural
not.
business.
So many people are not.
So I'm really proud of that. I did take a beekeeping class in college too. I didn't officially take it. I kind of just shadowed along with the class for a bit with the researcher. So when I was in college, my dad had found out that there's a Pennsylvania Honey Queen program. So he met the Pennsylvania Honey Queen at a beekeeping seminar.
What is that?
Exactly.
Is that like a pageant queen almost? Like
it's a sort. It can seem that way because you have a crown and you have a sash.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so the Honey Queen program, there's a couple states that have it. Many states that have a queen program. So it's a young woman who just travels to schools, fairs, festivals, media interviews, all kinds of stuff. You're just talking to people about honeybees and beekeeping and teaching them, how to take care of bees. Pretty much a lot of the conversation we just had.
Really, like repping your passion.
Right.
Have you been a honey queen?
Definitely. So
you have. Yeah. Holy shit, we're talking with a honey queen.
So my dad told me about, hey, I met the honey queen. Maybe you want to do something like this. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll do it. I mean, I honestly thought that it was more of an honorary kind of thing. I did not know what I was getting into it. I signed up for it. But it turned out to be this. So I took the beekeeping class shadowing to kind of, brush up on things going into this competition because I wasn't sure how, who I'd be up against. And it was really cool. And I found out, as I got into it, that this was mainly an educational role and that, this was in 2011. So I spent that year, I logged over 25,000 miles just in my car, just going back and forth across Pennsylvania, doing schools and fairs and stuff and just talking to people all over the place about the Queen program, which was really cool. And I mean, about honeybees in general, why they're important for us.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
There's also an American Honey Queen program.
All these different honey queens.
I know, nobody knows about it. But there's an American Honey Queen program. So I was the American Honey Queen too in 2012.
Wow.
So I spent
Congrats.
Yeah, so I spent that year traveling the country too, talking about bees along the way.
Really?
So
how many people are in this program like it?
So I went to the North American Beekeeping Conference this year after not having gone for several years. So this is my first year back. We actually did a Honey Queen reunion. So
oh wow,
there's been 60 years for the American Honey Queen program now. Well, 61 years now. This is the 61st year. So along the way, there's been about over 350 women from different states that have come to that competition to compete. So and I think it was about 115 queens and princesses throughout the years then.
That's crazy. So, that's some heavy stuff.
So if anyone out there wants to be a honey queen, give me a call.
Show you the ways of being
scheduled for the
queen.
Pennsylvania program, so I'm happy to help.
Wow. So you now you're pretty much, I mean, like you're an educator. You're going around to, do you still currently go around to places and give talks and demonstrations and things like that?
Yeah, we have some things on the schedule this spring too. I've done in the last couple of years. We've done definitely not like back when I was a honey queen. It's definitely not the same kind of schedule. But yeah, I'll go to different events. Maybe somebody wants. There's a group that wants to learn more about health and beauty benefits of honey. So we'll do a presentation for that. Some people want to know about cooking with honey, so we'll talk about different flavors and do samplings and tastings, and then whip up a couple recipes and send you home with some recipes to try on your own.
That is awesome.
Yeah, and I do school presentations and stuff. This time of year, it's more common as a lot of schools will have like a bug unit or an insect unit in the spring.
Yeah.
And then in September is National Honey Month, so we'll maybe do a couple presentations then. And Rosh Hashanah also typically falls in September. So, the Jewish high holidays, it's customary to have apples with honey for a sweet new year too. So there are a lot of really great schools around here that we will occasionally do presentations that time of year too, because the students are interested in it.
Yeah, you incorporate it into that.
Right.
Wow. That's pretty intense. Now, so from you making this transition of a hobbyist into someone to make a profit off of honey and making a business that you could, you have a brick and mortar store. Like, what is the jump? Like, how many hives do you need? Like how do you get enough material to be able to make I'm telling you, I'm looking around this store. There's all kinds of stuff in here. It's like, how many hives do you need?
Well, we run about 150, 200. So, but really, even if we have a good number of hives, it's really dependent on the weather.
Yeah.
If you have a bad year and there's, too much rain and the bees aren't able to get out and collect honey, or if it's a really dry year and there's not a lot of nectar out there,
I guess that makes sense too.
It can be dependent. So yeah, some years are better than others, for sure, which is part of the reason why we do have a lot of other products in the store too, because, some people come here and they're just looking for honey. Other people's come in because, they want some lip balm. They want whipped lip balm. They think it's great. We do different colors and flavors for different seasons. So, thankfully, even if there's maybe not as much of a certain variety of honey on the shelf, because, eventually it will run out. We only make a finite amount. We're always hoping to have more hives to produce more.
Yeah.
There's always that mountain of beeswax. It doesn't run out quite as quickly.
Yeah, so you use it.
Right. So we can make candles and lotions and lip balms and other products to kind of complement the honey that we have in store too.
Wow. Now, where do you you have you have land to keep all these on?
We have, we have the main apiary in southern Allegheny County, and there probably are about 30 or 40 hives there.
Apiary is a that's for bees.
Yeah.
Apiary? I didn't know what that word meant. But
apiary, yeah, bee farm.
Now that's like it's not just yours, there's other hives there and everything?
That's just my dad's property.
Oh, okay.
So he has he's about 30 or 40 hives on his property. But the nice thing about bees is you set the hive down and that's it. Those 2 square feet is all that you need to get started.
I guess, yeah.
Because they fly in any direction 2 or 3 miles to pick up whatever they need. So you might have friends or family members or somebody that just has some acreage that says, hey, I'd like to have some bees here. I want a better garden, but I really don't want to be a beekeeper. Do you want to put some hives here? So we'll do that. Maybe
that's a good point. I never thought about that either.
Yeah. So we have different outyards, anywhere from like Washington through maybe Irwin. So a lot along 70 along that corridor. We also are establishing some more apiaries north of the city this year. We have some contacts, people that want hives in their property.
Yeah.
And we also do move them somewhat in the springtime for pollination. Not out of state or anything crazy like that, but there are just a couple orchards in the area that maybe want some hives in the spring. So we'll make sure that there are bees on their property, and most of them will stay there throughout the whole season. So
wow, that's pretty crazy. So you're just running around checking on bees all the time. Just
my dad does most of it. Yeah. He's probably. I'm usually here at the store or making products.
So he's still actively involved with all this. He's in it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Wow, and he loves it, I'm sure.
I think he has to.
I think he has to. Okay, so now was this your idea or was this your father's idea as far as like the store and creating like you said he was like a hobbyist in the beginning. Did you kind of lead that drive to make this a career as far as like making money with this?
Yeah, definitely. So he had done a lot of farmers markets in the city, stuff like that. And it just got to be a really hefty schedule, more than he wanted to do. He wasn't able to work with the bees as much dealing with the farmers markets. So he eventually decided to drop out of that. And around the same time, I started transitioning from just making lip balms for friends and stuff into having this brand, this Abebo tea. So I started making everything on my own and doing word of mouth sales and wholesale stuff, doing fairs and festivals also, craft shows, that sort of thing. So as he was kind of transitioning out of it, I was moving more into it. And as I would go to different events, people would say, this is great, I love this, but where's the honey it's made from? Can we get some of that?
That's a good point.
Right. So that's whenever, my husband and I were looking at, Abebo tea honey doesn't sound very good. It's very hard to pronounce. We call it AB at home.
Yeah.
So, we wanted to make a brand that was recognizable and something that, could be something that we could have, for a long time that maybe would turn into kind of an institution. So, Pittsburgh Honey was, wow, let's do this.
Might as well, right?
Yeah. So once we decided to rebrand the honey that way, we found that this store was open and, it took about 2 weeks from the time that we signed the lease until we opened the doors. We were like, let's just do this. It's tiny in here, so it didn't take all that much work.
You've had a good response to it. Like you have a lot of, I don't know, because I myself never went out looking for, beeswax lip balm or anything like that. You know what I mean? So like, I'm sure that there's like a market for people that come in and specifically want that. I didn't know that there was all kinds of benefits as far as like health and, I didn't know any part about that. I guess I should have thought about it a little bit more, but that makes sense. Let me see what else I have on here.
Sure.
There's so much stuff to learn. Oh, yeah. Okay. Jumping back into these bees a little bit. I was curious about this. With 60,000 bees in a hive, is there any problem with like inbreeding at all?
That's a good question because you wonder, what goes on in there if there's 60,000 bees. So to answer that really simply, the queen only mates outside of the hive and only once in her life. So when a queen first emerges from her cell, she's called a virgin queen. So she can't produce any eggs quite yet.
Yeah.
She will go on mating flights in her first week of life. And she'll fly out from the hive. I don't know exactly how far, but it's called drone congregation areas. There's, for some reason, drones, so the males from different hives tend to just kind of hang out in one certain area or
Really?
different areas. And there's speculations as to why they go to certain places. But at any rate, the queen will fly out to these areas and she'll mate with maybe 15 or 20 drones. They die in the process.
Jesus.
It's pretty brutal. So they die in the process. But the queen then is able to collect enough genetic material to lay eggs for the rest of her life. And that's it. I mean, she can lay up to about 500,000 eggs in her lifetime, if she were to continue to live that long.
And I guess like if the eggs that are being laid by that queen grow up to be fully matured, and I guess yeah. I mean,
but the good thing is this genetics from 15 or 20 different hives. Then so it's not like it's not like an inbreeding kind of thing because she's not mating with drones from her own colony. They're coming from different areas.
Wow, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, because when you have 50 or 60,000, you want to have the genetic diversity in that hive because if they're all susceptible to the same problem,
it's probably going to make them stronger.
Done. Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
Damn, that's crazy. Jeez. So many different things. Okay. Now, as far as things like killer bees, I'm super allergic to bees. I don't know if I'm necessarily allergic. Like my throat doesn't swell shut, but I swell up to no end. I got stung on my forehead. This is a two-part question. One, I want to know, are bees flying around at night? I feel like I don't see bees at night. I guess it's...
Definitely not.
Why though? Is it because it's cold?
It's because it's cold.
Okay.
Yeah, mainly it's because it's cold. They don't fly under about 50 or 55 degrees. They do so much work during the day. They need the sun to help orient themselves and map out the area too. So whenever they go out of the hive, they can come back and do a waggle dance, it's called. So in the dark
dance.
they'll do a dance either in a figure eight or in a circle, but they always will kind of wiggle their abdomen at the same angle each time, and that tells the other bees relative to the sun where to travel to get that same pollen and nectar. So, if a bee comes in and she does this dance, other bees can then leave the hive and go pick up stuff from the same flowers without the first bee ever going.
Holy
so
shit.
it's like giving them a roadmap.
That's crazy.
So they need the sun to fly. So you really won't see too many out at night.
I got stung at night. That's why I asked that. I was sitting on the front porch and, a couple bees flying around, and I got stung right in my forehead, and my whole face just completely swelled up. And I was curious if bees were out at night, and we just didn't see them because it was dark. But I guess it makes sense because it's cold. Jeez, that's crazy. Now,
face stings are not good.
Yeah, it wasn't good at all. I have a whole time lapse picture of it. I was thinking about promoting this episode with the time lapse picture of my bees. So I have one 10 minutes after, and then it has like a size of a quarter on my forehead, and then like an hour later, you could see my eyebrows starting to swell up, and then 2 hours later, my whole face swells up, and then there is the next day where my whole face is just like ridiculous. My whole face is just ridiculous. And they sent me home from work. They were like, "What are you doing here?" I drove people home from a car dealership, and they were like, "You definitely can't be here with your face like that."
You're scaring the customers. Go home.
So, what's your next move with like all this as a whole? Like, you're just going to keep churning out, all this stuff. Like, I mean, it seems to be you're in the beginning stages of all this. Like, you just started all this.
This is small, I think.
Is your husband into bees?
He doesn't have a choice at this point.
Yeah. I'm sure you're the bee lady now.
Yeah, he's interested in it for sure. He thinks this is really cool. I think the first time he was really into the bees ever, and So last summer we had a swarm call. Generally, we have a hive of bees in the window here.
Yeah.
And there's actually a tube that would connect out the wall so they can come and go.
Really?
And, yeah, and you can see how they change throughout the season.
So they could sting everyone in Squirrel
Hopefully
Hill.
not. Hopefully not. No.
That's
no.
where the what did you call that? A demo?
An
or
observation hive?
Observation hive. That's usually in the front window.
Yeah. And they, honeybees don't like to sting you so much because if they do, they die. When they sting, they have little hooks at the end of their stinger.
It pulls
it's barbed.
out.
Yeah, so they die afterwards. So they don't like to do it unless they really have to. So generally, it's one of those, if you don't bother them, they're not going to bother you sorts of situations. So thankfully, but if you did get stung by a bee, any bee,
Yeah.
Take a look and you can tell if it's a honeybee because you'll have this stinger left behind in your skin. So you don't want to squeeze it. You want to just scrape it out with your nail or use a card or something to get it out.
That's what they taught me in Boy Scouts.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they're right. You want to get that out as quickly as possible so you don't have as much venom entering you. Unless, of course, you're into bee venom therapy, then by all means, let it go.
That's a thing?
That's a thing.
Bee venom therapy?
Bee venom therapy. It's a thing for everything from, arthritis to we've had customers coming in for bee venom for
Whoa.
Lyme's disease treatment.
What do you mean? Like you put a bee on there?
I'm not going to do it. You want to take the bees and you can do it.
So you'll give them a couple bees.
We've had instances in the past where people have wanted to do that. Yeah, get a couple bees and go get stung because so when you think about it, if you get stung, like you said, you had swelling. Most people do get localized swelling. Hopefully you don't have,
Your
if
throat
you
swelling shut or anything
right,
like
then
that.
that's a more very, very serious reaction. But you can expect to have some general swelling in the area. So
I
let's
guess
say
that shoots internal chemicals and different blood and everything there, and it probably
Exactly.
causes. Wow,
exactly.
Didn't even think about that.
There's the American Apitherapy Association. So there's actually a whole group of people interested in it, and I've seen it at at a conference. Actually, I did sting somebody the doctor was there with me, but most of the people are not getting stung in the area. Like if you have maybe a stiff knee all the time, maybe you would get stung around the joint, but most people are getting stung like on the base of the spine. So it's kind of it's almost like a acupuncture sort of thing too. They'll kind of merge those two things together as well to try to get the benefits of it.
That's pretty wild. That's like electric stim. Like whenever I played football, I never knew how it worked, but it produces like a pulse that produces the healing chemical right to that spot.
Right.
So I guess like a bee is like a natural version of
I think
that
it's a
little bit.
similar thing, to an extent. I mean, you don't want to get stung like crazy
Yeah,
if
too
you don't
many
have
times.
to, but it's possible.
That
So.
is nuts. Wow, definitely wild. So whenever you're doing these harvests and everything like that, how do you keep the bees at bay? Like, what's up with the smoke?
Oh yeah, the smoker. The kids love that whenever we do school presentations.
I loved
it's
it.
cool.
I loved it.
Yeah, if you've seen the bee movie, with that big poster
I've never
here.
seen it.
Well,
I gotta watch it, I guess.
well, just maybe skip it. So
Yeah.
it's okay.
I see Jerry Seinfeld's in it and Renee Zellweger, so like, I can't miss it now.
Well, in the bee movie, the bees, that makes them sick, they're coughing, all that good stuff. But that's not the case at all. So when you go into a hive to check it, the bees are still moving around. I mean, they're just doing their thing.
Yeah.
We're just trying to open up the frames to see what's going on, make sure they're okay, and then close it back up and move on our way. But the bees are still there. They're still active. So to kind of calm them down, we take the smoker, we fill it with wood chips, burlap, pine needles, whatever's going to make a lot of cool smoke.
Yeah.
And you put smoke at the entrance of the hive and a little bit under the lid before you break it open to check it out. And when the bees smell the smoke, they think that their hive's on fire, and stop, drop, and roll, you want to get out. But before they leave, they want to take the most valuable thing that they have with them, and that would be the honey. So before they get out of the hive, they're going to go to the honey cells and they're going to start filling up on that, because if that hive were to burn down for any reason, they have to build a new one, and they have to start with honeycomb, which is made from wax. So they got to have a lot of honey energy to start to produce that wax. So long story short, when you put smoke in the hive, the bees smell it, they react by eating. They're busy, they don't notice us in the hive so much. And at the same time, when they're filled up with honey, they're moving more slowly, and they can't really push their stingers out to use them without forfeiting that honey in their honey stomach. So,
that makes sense.
yeah, so it doesn't hurt them or harm them in any way.
Kind of preoccupies them.
Yeah, it masks the pheromones in the hive, so they're not communicating quite so much. There are attack pheromones, so if you're stung once, other bees might be drawn to that area. But if you are working a hive, maybe you'd put some smoke on your hand if you got stung there, so the bees don't come towards it.
Is it
So,
true that
same kind of thing.
if you kill a bee, other bees could tell that you killed a bee and they're gonna gravitate towards that? Is that true?
I don't know, but I'm gonna say probably they can tell.
Yeah.
They probably can tell.
That's messed up.
It's all pheromones, If they smell that, I'm sure they can tell.
I'm sure they could. Jeez. I mean, I don't have any. Now, I do have a last question. Okay, so I watched this thing on Vice documentary about this. I don't know if this was like some Tanzania honey or something. It's like honey from somewhere that had like hallucinogenic qualities in it. Like, how does where do killer bees and things like that come into play with all that? I know that's a broad question, but like, what makes a killer bee a killer bee? We'll do this as a 2-part question.
All right. Well, there is hallucinogenic honey. I'm pretty sure. I've also seen reports of that.
You saw that on?
I've seen those. Yeah.
You should watch it on Vice. It's pretty wild. These people are literally getting like stung in the face to get this honeycomb, and they're just like tripping while they're eating it. And I'm just.
I remember
like,
seeing something like that. I don't know exactly what it is that they're getting into, but yeah, I mean they're taking the nectar from those plants. So I mean, if there's something that has an effect on humans and that's transmitted through the nectar,
I
then
guess that would be
it
why.
Can definitely happen. I know that there can be, certain plants that maybe are toxic.
Yeah.
That honeys can be produced from it too. So there's certain things that maybe you want to avoid. I can't remember off the top of my head what those are.
Yeah.
But there are.
There is honey
happen.
that can make you sick from like bees that are not necessarily. I'm not sick. I feel is a heavy word, but
yeah, it definitely is. I mean, there's I can't remember if it's. I don't even know if there's anything like that in this area, but there are certain plants that maybe would have an adverse reaction to if you had a whole lot of it. But I don't think the bees are likely to produce it unless they have to. If there's another nectar around, I think they go.
Yeah,
to
if
that
there's
first.
no choice, then they'll probably do
that. It might be something of that sort. But to answer the other part of your question, there are. We call them Africanized honeybees.
Yeah, Africanized. I've heard that before.
So Africanized bees, they, again, bees are not from this country. They're not from this continent. There are European honeybees. There's also African honeybees, Africanized ones. They can be definitely more aggressive. But I think that aggression is actually kind of a mistaken. They're more sensitive to the pheromones, the chemical smells. So let's say that you were stung by an Africanized honeybee. The other bees in that hive would be like, oh my gosh. They smell that attack pheromone, and they might be more super defensive of the hive to get you out of there. So there are reports of them, following people for some time.
You'll get Macaulay Culkin.
They just want to chase you out of their hive. They want you to stay away. Now there are positives to them, believe it or not. The reason why we even have them in this country is they were brought over for research because they're really, really amazing honey producers. They produce a lot of honey and. They tend to have fewer instances of diseases in the hive, and part of that is because they swarm more often than other strains of honeybees, I believe. So, since a lot of the diseases or problems with the bees are in the larva or in the brood that's left behind, you don't carry the eggs with you whenever you move.
Oh, that's a good point.
They can leave a lot of that stuff behind.
So they're moving around and they're not like carrying the bad stuff with them.
Not so much, right? So there are some positives to them. So the reason that that beekeepers had Africanized bees was to try to breed out some of those aggressive tendencies or those super defensive tendencies and to breed in some of the good things. So let's say you have the good thing is in our area we don't have them quite so often. They tend to be in the warmer southern states. But if you do get what we call a hot hive, a hive that's maybe they're a little bit more aggressive, you don't like them.
Yeah.
It's a very simple solution. You find the queen and you put a new queen in that hive. You remove the old queen. You squish her. You do whatever you have to do. You stop that genetics from continuing on, and you can requeen with another type of queen that is from a milder strain
and that'll take care of it.
It takes 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, but that'll phase it out.
Right, any of the new bees being produced in that hive are going to be from that milder.
I guess that
queen.
Makes wow.
So
that's
there's
crazy.
There's workarounds for a lot of that sort of stuff.
Did you ever watch My Girl whenever you were growing up?
I remember, yeah.
Did that ever like scare you or your family from that?
I'm pretty sure those were. It was a wasp's nest, I think.
Was it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I don't remember
I
too
think
much.
so. I remember the scene, vaguely. I don't remember exactly what happened, but I don't think they were honeybees. So
I guess it was a wasp nest because it was like a hanging. It was like the big hanging.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I think for us, we were able to spot those differences, and we weren't too concerned. Of course, yeah. I mean, I don't like to be stung any more than the other person does, but I'm definitely not in fear. That my bees are going to just go crazy. They have other things to worry about. I am the least of their worries. When I'm opening up the hive, they just want to get back to work.
Yeah. Wow. All right. I think that is all the questions that I had that I'm going to grill you about bees. I do an ending segment on a podcast. I do it with everyone. Are you a fan of The Office?
I do remember the.
Okay, so they have an episode of The Office where they get locked out of a building and they play a game called Desert Island Questions. I give each guest 3 categories to take with them on a desert island. No pressure at all. You can take your time with answering. But the first category is going to be things to watch on a desert island. So you get 3 choices of things to watch. You could take whole series. You could take whole like if you like Harry Potter, you could take every single one. I'm not going to limit you to that, but you get 3 choices. I make these questions at the end because obviously we just talked about bees for almost an hour and a half, and it doesn't really give us a lot about you as a person. Now, if you had to pick 3 things to watch, what would they be?
I have to pick 3 things.
3 things.
3 things.
Anything you want. TV shows, movies, anything.
Oh my gosh. That is tough.
It's very tough. I have 4 or 5 more questions. So.
Well, you know what? There's 15 seasons of Supernatural, or there's about to be 15 seasons of it. Is
that about the end?
They just announced that next year is going to be the last season, or whatever the next one is the last one.
Luke Perry was in that, right?
No, I don't think so.
Was that? Oh, no, that was Riverdale. Riverdale. Sorry.
Yeah, it's probably a spinoff. I don't know. There's 15 seasons of that. So, I mean, that could probably be pretty good to have on repeat. I don't know. It's kind of interesting.
That's a lot of stuff to watch.
There's a lot of content there, so why not? So, yeah, I'd probably go with some Supernatural just because it's good.
Okay.
Oh, man. You know what? I really love one of my favorite movies, and it's probably stupid, but one of my favorite movies is Moonrise Kingdom. I think it's hilarious.
Oh, yeah, that's a good movie.
It's adorable,
Yeah.
So I just think that's very funny. I could probably watch that a pretty good number of times on a desert island. So I'm going to go with that too.
That's the one with Edward Norton, right?
Yeah, he's in it. Yeah,
yeah. That's a good one.
He's in
I like
the Wes
those a lot.
Anderson. Well, maybe just the Wes Anderson stuff. I mean, they're just.
You could take all of them.
Let's take all of them. They're all very funny.
The only one that I've seen
Kinda quirky.
was I saw Steve Zissou, Life Aquatic, and did he do the Royal Tenenbaums? I can't remember.
I want to say yes.
Yeah, I think he did. My favorite
might
thing
be
about
wrong.
all the Wes Anderson movies is the color palettes that he uses. I love that.
It's very cool. It's like a Technicolor kind of thing. It's
Yeah, I
very
love
nice.
it. They have Instagrams now that just show different scenes
Picture,
of movies
and then the
with
colors.
all the colors under it. I don't know why I love that.
It's very calming. It's great.
It is. It's calming, and it's just you're and there's there's thoughts behind it. All those colors complement each other. So while you're looking at that photo, it's all that is visually pleasing to you in a way deeper manner than you just being oh, that's a cool photo.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. So Supernatural, all Wes Anderson's
Yeah,
films.
let's do that. Oh man. I don't even know. I don't even know what else I watch.
The Bee Movie.
Definitely not. I do not want the Bee Movie. That is a cultural phenomenon too. I've seen T-shirts with the entire script of the Bee Movie printed out on it. It's a T-shirt of it.
Oh, really?
Why?
Is it that good though? Is it worth watching?
I don't think so. I don't know if it's just a big running joke. I'm sorry. I watched it a few times. It's just not accurate.
That's all right. That's probably yeah, you're too close to it. You know the real shit about it, and that's just a glamorized version.
Exactly.
Of it, I'm sure.
It's very. I feel like I'm totally missing things. There should be stuff that I'd want to watch all the time, but
That's right. That's why I put people on the spot like this.
I've actually watched it several. The Office is good, but I do like Parks and Rec. I could watch Parks and Rec 100 times too, because that's one of the only series that I like that they actually tied up all the loose ends at the end, and it's really funny. So
yeah,
all right, I can handle that.
Those are good. Those are definitely good choices. So you have Supernatural, all the Wes Anderson films, and Parks and Rec. Those are good choices. That covers all the bases. I feel.
Yeah.
You got all the Feely in Wes Anderson. Supernatural. I don't know too much about it, but
it's crazy. I don't know. There's just so many of them.
Yeah, a lot of people. You're not the first person that's brought that. That's what the two brothers, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It's very interesting.
I definitely see it on commercials and everything. Okay, so that was the first category. The second category is things to read. So you could take 3 books, series, whatever you like to take on a desert island.
So I do have a goal. My goal is to try to read a presidential biography in order of all the presidents.
Really?
I'm on like number 4, so I have a long way to go.
Do all of them have biographies?
Well, I mean, I don't think they wrote them all themselves.
No.
But
Well,
there,
yeah, I
but there
guess.
definitely is a biography for every president. So that as I get past one, I just do a Google search, like what's the best.
You're a history buff?
Not at all, but I want to win Jeopardy. Okay, which I probably should have brought all the Jeopardies with me too. That'd be great on an island.
Yeah.
But,
you take that as a consolation.
Yeah. So I would definitely have to bring some presidential biographies, not because it's really that. It's not the best reading, but, I do feel pretty smart whenever I'm learning something about history.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It gives you a better understanding of
I never
how we
paid
got to where we
attention
are.
in school.
I never knew anything about the presidents. And I definitely, some kids had to learn, all the presidents in order.
All of them in line.
I don't know any of them. So,
Yeah, I don't know any.
nope, not so many. So,
It's terrible.
I would definitely have to bring that along with me.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a Steinbeck fan, so I'd have to bring all the Steinbeck books too.
Okay.
I'm really into that. And I don't know. My other favorite book is Les Mis. I know that's really lame, but I think that's a really, really great book, Les Miserables. So
I know what it is, but I've never watched it.
it's one of those things
Or
where
I've never read it or
sometimes the
watched
book
it.
is better than the movie and,
Yeah.
and whatever else is going on out there. So, I'd have to bring that for sure.
Did they do that in high school? Was that?
I think they, yeah. I
I'm
think
pretty
so.
sure that they did. I think
Probably.
that's the only reason I remember it too much. That and the kid in Heavyweights had a T-shirt that said Les Mis on it. Okay, those are good choices though. And then the last category is things to listen to. So you could take, albums, CDs, best of CDs, greatest hits.
hits. Okay. Well, all right. So all right. Well, I can't just bring like Pandora or anything that doesn't work on a desert island, I'm assuming.
No,
Not at all.
doesn't work.
My
I'm already
husband's
giving
really.
you like DVD players and like whole books.
We have enough electronics.
Yeah.
Well, I'm mainly like, into indie rock kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
but my husband has really introduced me to all the, hair bands and 80s stuff. And I love
Really?
it. It's great. I would bring Van Halen best of, like all the Van Halen stuff. I think
I
is
can
great.
get down with some Van Halen.
I would definitely, it's just, it's fun.
I don't like Van Hagar. I like Van Halen.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
David Lee Roth, and that is it. Purist. Yeah, so definitely bring that whole discography just because it's fun.
Okay.
Lately I've been listening to I really like there's just Glass Animals. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
Glass Animals.
It's all this indie stuff, but
I
think
like some
they're
indie stuff.
yeah, I'm into that. So I would probably bring. I think that's a cool sounding album. And weirdly enough, I love John Frusciante from the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Oh, yeah.
So he has a whole solo career too. So
Really?
I know, weird, but and some
I
of
had
it's
no
kind of
idea.
strange. Yeah.
What kind of music is it?
Whiny, just sorry.
Whiny?
No, it's very
Wow.
He's a very interesting person. That's somebody I have read, a biography about. He had a very rocky life, so there's a lot of stuff that's, very lyrical. Some of it's that's, there's just yelling and stuff. But
Yeah.
there's other stuff that's just really, good. So I would bring that with me too.
Those are good choices too. You have a wide variety of things that you like. That's good.
Hopefully.
I mean, that's good. You're going to be stuck on an island forever.
Great.
So the second to last is death row meal. So you could have whatever you want to eat from wherever you want to eat, as much as you would like to eat. Multiple places if you want, but food.
Food. Okay. Facebook is food book for me. That's all I do.
Yeah.
It's like take pictures of food. So
I love food.
I would have to bring sushi. I mean, number one. I know that's
That's all
probably
right.
cliche, but I love.
A lot of people bring sushi.
I have to. Sushi's the best. There's something.
Who do you think has the best sushi in the city?
Well, just up the street, there's Chaya.
I don't think I went there.
Chaya's really good. But we normally go over to Mount Lebanon, Little Tokyo.
Oh yeah, I've been there numerous times.
Yeah.
Theirs is really good.
They have really good stuff. So.
I like.
Oh, and Andy too, down at Woolies. Did you ever go to Woolies?
I've
fish
been there, but
market?
I've never had any of the sushi from there.
Andy makes the best stuff.
Huh.
Yeah.
A guy that I work with is always telling me to go down there and eat some food. Sushi for me though, I love Taipei Tokyo in Monroeville.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a hidden gem. But other than that, I really love Yokoso. I don't think that anyone has had a better spicy tuna roll than Yokoso's.
Well, if you like Yokoso's spicy tuna roll too, if you go to, oh my gosh, what's the one down on the south side?
That's Nakama.
Nakama will do a spicy tuna roll, and if you ask, they will deep fry it for you.
Really? A little tempura.
So you get a tempura spicy tuna. That's
I can
really
get down
good
with some
too.
sushi.
You should
That's
try
good.
that. Definitely bring some sushi. You know what? I'm gonna bring some O's fries with me too, because you got to have some comfort food out there.
I've
on
only
the
had
desert
them
island
once.
too.
I've only had them one time.
It's probably enough for your system. Was one time.
I remember
But
eating
they're
them,
pretty good.
and I was like, it's almost like the caboose for me.
Yeah.
Like the caboose is cool. Like speaking of the caboose,
Are they open today?
They quit serving fries.
Oh no.
Yeah, they quit serving fries from what I hear through the grapevine. I haven't been there in years, but like that's obviously
that's a shame.
if you went to our high school, that was the staple. But yeah, it's like it's cool. I'll eat there, but I'm not gonna die over it. You know what I mean? Have you been to Streets on Carson?
No, but I've heard about this.
Streets on
Is it
Carson,
good?
it's so good. It's
Okay.
unreal. If you like food, that's definitely a foodie place to go. They have street foods from around the world. I can't like rave about it enough. And there's another place that I just went yesterday that blew me away. It's called Yoli's. It's up by CCAC on I don't know what road that is, but it's right near CCAC by Century 3, and it's like an Italian restaurant, and it's unreal.
Really?
Yeah, it's unreal. They have the best pizza I've had so far, and I only had it yesterday. I was blown away by it though. Yoli's, I would try that out. All right, anything else for the desert island or for the death row meal?
Yes, I'm going to bring an endless supply of the Olive Garden Zuppa Toscana soup. I think
I think I did
that's
have
like
that
the
before.
potato and sausage one.
Yeah, I've had that.
Just keep it coming.
Yeah,
That'll-
just endless bucket. Their breadsticks, and I love their salad and breadsticks for sure.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, who doesn't love it? That's a good choice. Anything else?
I think that's enough food, right?
Yeah.
I thought I only got 3 choices.
I mean, for Desert Island, you can just whatever you could rattle off. Someone was just talking about. Someone said frosty cone, and I haven't been there yet this year, and
I haven't either.
I'd like to go back. All right. The last question that I ask everyone on the podcast is: if you could have a conversation with anyone alive or dead, who would it be and why?
That's
It's a heavy question.
that is anyone.
A lot of people say like a loved one. Like
Yeah,
I
like
would
a
talk to
family member
my
who's passed.
grandfather for sure, but if it wasn't a loved one, that's what I'm more curious about.
Like somebody from history that I'd want to talk to, or now, or
Anyone,
Or in the
alive or
past.
dead.
huh?
We've had every answer on here from Randy Marsh from South Park to some people have talked. My buddy was just like, I'd like to talk to anyone that worked on building the pyramids.
Yeah,
I just want to know how that went. And I was like, damn, that's pretty good.
that is pretty good. Because that's what I was thinking. Like, who would I talk to? That. So, I mean, I don't know, because like I don't really have, people think about like, who's like their mentor or like role model or something. I always have a hard time answering that too, because honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely
there's
super
so much
hard.
out there. But so, a name that did pop into my head, somebody who was like probably knew a whole lot would be like what about Nikola Tesla?
Yeah.
Didn't he kind of pretty much revolutionize
Yeah.
a lot of
That would be
mechanics
wild.
and
It would be
engineering
wild
and
to
stuff,
talk
as we
to
know,
him.
electricity. I don't think I spoke whatever language he speaks.
That's
or
all right.
spoke, but I don't know. I probably would go over my head, but
That's a good answer.
he'd probably be pretty cool to talk to, because talking about like pyramids and like maybe aliens and stuff and whatever. Didn't he? I don't know.
I mean,
He was into some weird stuff. I think.
that's the shit that I'm trying to get into is like talking about the pyramids and the aliens.
Yeah.
Like that's what I want to learn
Nikola
about.
probably knew.
Yeah, he probably did. I mean, I bet he did. All right. Well, I mean, that's pretty much it. I appreciate you taking the time out to like kind of educate me with all this bee talk. Take a time and promote anything you want to promote. Plug your store, Instagram, whatever.
Oh, yeah. Social media I'm not too great at. So if you want to follow us, I'm pretty sure it's at Pittsburgh Honey on Instagram, Facebook, /Pitt Honey. Feel free to check us out. I try to update as much as possible. But definitely, this year, if you come across a swarm of bees, definitely give me a call. So if you'll
take over
know,
bees, like if you
yeah,
find a swarm.
that's probably the most important thing for people to know about. As we're getting into swarm season in May and June, if you see just a bundle of bees somewhere, like a big cluster of bees, give us a call. Just search Pittsburgh Honey. Give us a call. Text me a picture of it. Any of the numbers that's on our website or on our Google page goes to my phone. So shoot me a picture of whatever's going on, and if it's honeybees and we can help, yeah, I'll be over as quick as I can and remove them for you. So that's probably the most important thing, because like I'm always looking for freebies.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't know that you
It's a
would
little
come
bit of
over
work,
and
but-
take over bees. Now, what's the address here?
We're at 2327 Murray Avenue, so Lower Murray, by Forward.
Right
and
near the
Parkway.
Get-Go.
Yeah, the Get-Go Starbucks building.
It's right going up the hill on the Get-Go on the right-hand side, and you'll see a
real creepy mannequin. in the
real
window.
creepy mannequin with a bee suit on, and you'll see some bee boxes, and definitely come and look it out. You got all kinds of stuff in here.
Yeah, come and check us out. If anyone's into like volunteering and stuff too, we just adopted a highway here at the tunnel. So on April 7th, we're doing a cleanup day at 2 p.m. If you want to come out and pick up some trash and talk about bees and plant some bees, wildflower seeds and stuff with us.
Yeah.
Sign up online too on one of our websites. Happy to get some volunteers to do stuff like that too.
Absolutely.
But yeah, otherwise, feel free to stop in. We have samplers of pretty much everything here. If you want to just hang out, ask some questions, or come on in.
Bee talk.
Bee talk.
All right, everyone's listening. We appreciate it as usual. I'll have everything linked below. All the web. Do you have a website?
Yeah, PittsburghHoney.com.
PittsburghHoney.com. I'll have all this stuff linked below. You can just scroll up and click on the link right there, and you'll be able to get to it. Everyone else that's listening, go on I'llCallYouRightBack.com. There's merch on there. There's current episodes. Check out my website. Just build it. I'll Call You Right Back on Instagram. That's where I'm most active. You could find out who's coming up, who's currently on the last episode, everything. Send me an email of people you'd like me to have on here, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I'll call you right back.